Wow. So Indigo just released their financial results for the quarter and 9 months ending December 31st, 2024. I mean, the numbers are pretty interesting, right?
Right, they've definitely had a busy quarter. The report shows both standalone and consolidated figures, and it seems like they've been navigating a pretty complex market situation.
Yeah, I noticed that. What with all the details on compliance under SEBI regulations and all that, it's kind of like they're dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's. So, what are some of the key things that jumped out at you from the report?
Well, for starters, their total income saw a pretty significant jump. I mean, it went up by 14.6% compared to the same quarter last year. That's a good sign, right? It suggests more people are flying with them.
Yeah, definitely a good sign. But how does that actually break down, like between revenue from operations and other income?
Well, their revenue from operations went up by 13.7%, and other income went up by a whopping 44.6%. It seems like they've got a handle on generating revenue, both from their core business and also from other avenues.
That's interesting. So it's not just ticket sales, they're diversifying their revenue streams. Now, what about expenses? How are they managing on that front?
Well, their total expenses did increase, going up by 19.9%. A large part of that was actually driven by a significant increase in aircraft and engine rentals, which jumped up by 153.6%.
Oh, wow, 153.6%. That's a huge leap, right? So, why the sudden jump in rental costs, do you think?
It could be due to expanding their fleet or needing to use more leased aircraft. It's like when you're trying to scale up your business, sometimes you need to rent extra equipment, and that comes with a cost.
Right, that makes sense. So, even with those rising expenses, did they still manage to turn a profit?
Actually, yes, they reported a profit before tax of about 25,271 million rupees, though that's a bit down, 15.7% lower compared to the same quarter last year.
Okay, so profitable, but a bit less so than last year. That's kind of the gist. What about the net profit, the actual profit after tax?
The net profit or PAT came in at 24,488 million rupees, which is about 18.3% lower than last year's quarter. It seems like the increased expenses did eat into their profit margins.
Okay, so the rising expenses are definitely a factor. But something I'm also curious about is what's their earnings per share looking like?
Well, the basic earnings per share was about 63.38 rupees, and the diluted earnings per share was about 63.30 rupees. These numbers, though, aren't annualized for this quarter.
Okay, got it. So a little less than last year, but still healthy. What about their overall cash position? I mean, how much cash are we talking about?
They've got a total cash position of 437,808 million rupees. It seems like they are in a pretty strong liquidity position, which is good for future planning.
That is a lot of cash. And how much debt do they have?
Their total debt, including capitalized operating lease liability, comes to about 651,385 million rupees. That seems like a considerable amount.
Okay, so they're carrying some debt, but also have good cash reserves. It's like they have some rainy day funds, but also a mortgage to pay.
Exactly. And speaking of the operational side of things, it's interesting how they've expanded their network. They've added new domestic and international routes. It's like adding new roads to your travel network.
Yeah, I saw that in the investor presentation. They have a pretty wide network now. How much has it grown compared to last year?
Well, their available seat kilometers or ASKs went up by 12%, and revenue passenger kilometers, RPKs, increased by 13.5%. So they are flying more and with more passengers.
It seems like there's a healthy increase in demand for their services, right?
Absolutely. They're also reporting a good load factor of 86.9%. That means most of their seats are full.
That's great. It shows their flights are well occupied. But what about the cost per available seat kilometer or CASK?
The CASK came in at 4.83 rupees. And if we exclude fuel costs, it is 3.25 rupees. Their CASK ex-fuel ex-forex is 2.90 rupees. It looks like they're working hard to control costs. despite the fluctuating fuel prices.
Okay, so cost control is a priority. That makes sense, especially with rising fuel prices and all the geopolitical things happening, right?
Precisely. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that the company is also dealing with some tax issues. There is a tax exposure of 24,185 million rupees related to disallowances by income tax authorities.
Oh, that's a significant amount. So they're in a tax dispute?
Yeah, it's related to some incentives they received and some expenses that were disallowed. They're actually challenging this in court and they believe they'll have a favorable outcome.
I see. So they're fighting it. That's good to know. So it's like they're having a legal battle while trying to run an airline.
Right. And they're also dealing with some issues related to the goods and services tax or IGST on reimport of aircraft parts.
So they're paying under protest, right? Like they don't think they should be paying it, but are doing so just to comply. Am I understanding it right?
Exactly. They paid about 811 million rupees under protest, and the cumulative amount paid is 18,019 million rupees. It's another legal battle they're facing.
It seems they have a lot on their plate. So overall, how would you summarize their financial performance this quarter?
Well, they've shown good revenue growth and strong operational metrics, but the profit margins took a hit due to increased expenses, especially aircraft rentals. There are also these legal and tax issues hanging around.
Okay, so growth, but with some challenges, seems like they're navigating a complex landscape.
Absolutely. It's a bit like trying to fly a plane through a storm. You're making progress, but having to deal with turbulence along the way.
That's a good analogy. So what's their outlook for the next quarter? I mean, are they expecting improvement?
Well, they haven't given specific guidance, but based on this report, it seems like they'll continue focusing on network expansion, cost control, and also dealing with these regulatory challenges.
Right. It seems like they are in for some action-packed future ahead, navigating all of this. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like they're building a plane while flying it, so to speak. They're dealing with present challenges while looking at growth opportunities.
That's a good way to put it. It's a lot to manage. By the way, if any of you listening are into this kind of stuff, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We really appreciate the support.
And remember, disclaimer, we advise investors to check with certified experts before taking any investment decisions.
Definitely, that's really important. So overall, it seems IndiGo has some stuff to work through, but there are also a lot of positives to look at. It'll be interesting to watch how they move forward, right?
Indeed, it's like we've got to see how they're going to adjust their course with all these variables at play.
Absolutely. So we've covered a lot of ground today. Any final thoughts?
Well, it's clear that IndiGo's journey isn't a smooth one, but they're navigating it with resilience. The airline industry is complex, right? It's like piloting a ship through stormy seas. It requires a lot of skill.
Right, and constant adjustments. Well, that's a wrap for this discussion. Thanks for walking us through all of that.
My pleasure.